We first noticed Asher was having difficulties with learning when he was about 5. We ended up having him privately tested, and of course it came back that he was dyslexic. It was super overwhelming. Like there was just list and list of all these programs. So we started talking to people and felt like everybody was just saying something different. I hired the lady that had tested him. She tutored him for a year, one-on-one, 4 days a week. She came to me and was like, it's not working. Thankfully, she had met Dr. Conway. She just highly suggested the Morris Center. From there, my husband and I got in touch with the Morris Center, and Dr. Conway spoke with us over the phone, and you could just really tell his expertise in dyslexia.
Enroll your child or teenager at themorriscenter.com, or for virtual sessions, visit nowprograms.com.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Moms Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey friends, and welcome. This is an episode of Vintage Homeschool Moms, and today we're going to talk about unlocking learning potential. And it is episode 527. I know, who could possibly have that much to say, but obviously I do. And thanks so much for sticking with me and staying here. And you can find today's show notes at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com and look for episode 527 or Unlocking Learning Potential. Well, are you ready to learn about helping a struggling learner or one who has learning potential? Well, today I have an interesting guest online, but before I bring him on, I want to tell you I receive interesting emails from time to time with requests for interviews. And over the years, about 99% make it in the trash, but this one caught my eye. And those of you who have been with me for a while know it's because I have some children that learn differently. So Dr. Conway owns and operates the Morris Center, which has helped those with dyslexia with great success. In fact, the reason I actually read the email was the email did not come from him. Very smart marketing, by the way. It came from a parent of a student who went through the program. And so she was sharing about her child's success, and it kind of struck a chord with me because even with my background in elementary education, early childhood, and specific learning disabilities, as it was called in the day, I was taught as an educator to teach to a child's strengths, but we weren't taught on how to remediate the weakness. So how do you remediate in that day? And even today, I'm finding you don't remediate, you compensate, and that's not good enough for me. And I'm sure if you're homeschooling, or even if you have a child who is in school, you're going to want to, listen to this episode because it is going to be very educational for us. And so today it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Conway. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Felice. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, you're going to start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and, a little bit about the Morris Center as well.
Sure. Child had the propensity for dyslexia, but I don't really know for sure because I got early intervention at age 5 when one of my brothers couldn't read at the end of first grade. So we jokingly say dyslexia doesn't run in our family, it gallops, because I have nieces, nephews, first cousins, aunts, uncles, my father, my sister, many, many family members who struggle with this thing that we call dyslexia. Mm-hmm. So I chose a career path of brain sciences because I was fascinated by the brain. And I happen to have an aunt and uncle who are world famous for their work in dyslexia in the 60s. And she was a speech therapist and he was a linguist. And they wrote their first developmental language intervention remediation program in 1969. And that's how I got prevention at age 5. And my brother got full remediation at age 7 back in the 70s. Wow. So fast forward, today I've got a Ph.D. in neuropsychology. I'm published in many different areas of research, including neuroimaging and even neurorehabilitation. We have something that's even more severe than dyslexia. It's called phonological alexia. And that's what we call it when you have a brain injury like a stroke, which happens to 40,000 people every year.
Wow.
And they have a new reading problem because of their stroke. And so we've published research even in how to strengthen a more severe reading problem, in addition to the research we published on how to early intervene and close the gap in dyslexia. So my focus today is through the medical clinics of the Morris Center and through the online EdTech program called nowprograms.com, we're working to push out what we call evidence-based and randomized controlled trial proven remedial services for children, teens, college students, adults, and even older adults in their 70s. Our oldest student online to date,
Wow.
Felice, he's 74.
Wow.
And he wanted to change his reading skills, and we know how to do it, and he was ready to do it. So that's what we'll do.
Well, God bless him, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. So how would you define dyslexia?
Well, from the medical model, and I'm trained as a neuropsychologist, and we have a manual that gives us diagnostic criteria, and it defines dyslexia. We don't go to nonprofits or groups to try to say, what do they think it is? This manual is what all professionals are required to use to actually diagnose it. And there's only certain professionals who are actually licensed to diagnose. And it has 3 criteria. If you have weak or struggle with reading accuracy, that can be enough to diagnose you with dyslexia. If you have poor reading speed, you're really slow to read and it's really a struggle, that reading speed is the second criteria for diagnosing dyslexia. The third one is actually not reading accuracy, it's not reading speed, it's actually reading comprehension. If you struggle to comprehend what you're reading, that is the third and final criteria. And you only have to have 1 or 2 or 3. You don't even have to have all 3. Just even one of those 3 criteria is enough to diagnose you with dyslexia, which means you have some reading difficulties.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And so that's, in a nutshell, right? Because I'm sure there's levels and complexities. So if I, which I did, I had children that to me were not performing how our little charts said they should, and going to my oldest, he walked later, but he walked right in like at 13 months and it was like red flag for 15 months. And, basically first child. So a mom's thinking, well, I'm not letting this kid walk and I'm picking up, we start with all of the reasoning and convincing ourselves that there's not something wrong. When in the back of our mind, we're going, there's something wrong here. Also he had delayed speech. So he didn't really speak well till he had speech therapy. But he was the only one out of others who struggled in our family. And I know parents who maybe don't have an educational background, might not pick up on some of the nuances. So what are some warning signs and maybe red flags, if you will, that parents can say, oh, okay, we're going to need to do something. And the other thing I love is it's not too late, but if you have a little one, now's the perfect time.
Yeah, earlier is always better because it's called early intervention or prevention. And that's true of all healthcare. Nobody wants to see the cardiologist who says, come see me when you have a heart attack and I'll teach you all about cholesterol. It's like, no, how about we don't have that happen? Let's do the early intervention. But you're right, the brain's plasticity, which is a science term for ability to learn, never goes away. Whether you're 7 or 77, the brain has the capacity to build new wiring, new learning, and strengthen skills at any time. So the really important warning sign, which is very easy for anybody to tell, is something you and I were just discussing, which is, does anybody in your family, mom or dad, have any history, either themselves or a brother or a parent or a relative, who were poor readers, poor spellers, or back in the day, like the 50s, we just say they really weren't very, school material. School was not their thing. And if there's any family history, that's the number one risk factor. If both parents have history, either themselves or a immediate family member, that child that they're going to have has an 80% increased likelihood that they're going to have some type of difficulty in learning to read, learning to spell, or some aspect of learning difficulty. So the number one thing is family genetics, because reading problems are just genetic. And I jokingly tell kids, I was talking to a 12-year-old yesterday, and I said, Emma, do you know who you get to blame for your reading problems? She says, my mom and dad? I'm like, yeah, it's just genetics, it's their fault. I said, but do you know who mom and dad could blame? And she was a bright girl. She's like, oh, grandma and grandpa. I'm like, yeah, because it's just genetic. We get lots of strengths from our parents, and we get some difficulties and challenges too, including when you have a high IQ, and Emma did. And I said, who do you get to thank for that high IQ? She's like, oh, mom and dad as well. I'm like, yep, genetic as well. I said, so understanding your family genetics helps you understand that there's an increased likelihood. It's not a guarantee, doesn't always happen, but it's an increased likelihood probability. The number 2 predictor is something we have been teaching pediatricians to do with well-checked visits for 4-year-olds. It's been studied for about 3 decades now, and it's the number 1 predictor at age 4 of who's going to be a strong reader and who's going to be a poor reader. And that's a real simple activity, and moms and dads can do this with their kids at home. All you do is you say a word like cat, and then you ask your child to repeat it back to you. Say, now, Sally, you say cat. Sally says cat. Say, now I want you to say cat again, but this time change it. Say cat, but don't say the k sound. And the 4-year-old who's going to become a good reader will almost immediately look at you and go, at. And they can almost, in millisecond speed, hold that word that they heard you say. They can split it apart, figure out where the k sound is. They can take the k sound away. They can put the 2 sounds back together, and they can get their mouth to say it back to you. And it's just almost an automatic process. And that's what we call phonological awareness, which means your awareness of sounds that make up words. And kids who can hold on to a word, split it apart, and manipulate it a little bit are the kids who are going to be really strong readers. Kids who struggle with this at age 4, we can almost say 100% guaranteed will be having reading problems no later than age 9. So we want to early intervene, want to look for that skill set. Now, that doesn't mean that all kids who have reading problems are going to have articulation problems. That's a different part of the brain. That's a little bit more towards the front part of the brain that controls exact positioning of teeth, tongue, and lips. This is a speech processing piece that's a little bit further back on the left side of the brain. So they're related parts of that language part of the brain, but they do different things. The other warning sign is kids who struggle to learn their letters. You're trying to teach them the ABCs, and the next day it's like you didn't do it, like you're starting all over again. I had some parents say, we worked on Y for like 6 days in a row, and he still couldn't remember the sounds I told him the letter Y makes. So when kids start to have trouble learning their letters and their sounds, that's an even more clear risk factor that something's not working as easily as it should, because they're not being able to hold on to that visual piece of the letter and map that acoustic or that auditory piece of the sound and start to put those two together. Mm-hmm. So those are factors that all parents should watch for. Just the genetic family history, that very simple speech task of saying a word without a sound, like cat without the k sound, and also just watch and see how well are they learning their letters and sounds. Now, some kids will be what we call, they don't show up dyslexia right away because they're reading. And parents are like, no, he reads just fine. Well, but they're actually reading by one of the reading systems. There's 2 main reading systems. One is you sound words out. You look at, pot and you go pot, and you say pot and you're named a piece of a utensil in the kitchen. Another part of our reading skills is you can't sound out the word. English is just a very hodgepodge language. In fact, some people say it's a horrible language. It's just so hard to learn. If you look at yacht and you go ya-ach, and you say yachata, we're like, no, don't say that. Don't do that. Just say yacht. I'm like, but if I go at for pot, why don't I go ya-ach for yachata? Like, no, that's not how we say it. We say that word yacht. So then other parts of reading is memorizing the words because they're not something that can be sounded out. So some kids that are early readers are really strong with visual memory and their auditory memory, and they're learning to memorize words, but you'll see them really struggle to spell. And they'll be adding letters, they'll be leaving out letters. And there's 5 common mistakes you'll see kids make. They'll either add a sound that doesn't belong when they read or spell. They'll leave out a sound that should be there when they read or spell. They'll repeat a sound twice that's only supposed to be in there once when they read or spell. And they'll reverse 2 sounds, or they might substitute one sound in place of another. So when you see them add, omit, substitute, shift, or repeat sounds, either in reading or in spelling, or some kids are more severe, it actually happens in speaking. They'll say to you, Mom, I'm frustrated. And you'll say, honey, the word is frustrated. Say this after me, go ruh, ruh, ruh. And your child will go ruh, ruh, ruh. And you'll go frustrated. And they'll go ruh, 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 frustrated. You're like, no, you're making the O sound, not the sound. And what the parent doesn't understand is the child struggling to take on to that word, hold it apart, and split it apart to figure out that they're putting the O as a second sound and the mom wants them to change that to an sound, and they're struggling to actually break that word apart and make those kind of changes. That's another clear indicator that your child really doesn't have fully developed the skills that are precursor skills, the foundational skills for learning to read and spell in English.
So, for remediation, we learned, I learned this more as a homeschool parent when I was working with my own children, that the frustrating part of parenting, trying to get our children to learn these things, and as you shared some of the issues, that you have to fix the hard drive before you can put in the software, and the software would be the educational piece of it.
Yes.
So that's basically what you're doing with your program, is you're fixing the hard drive through some, sequential things that you're doing. So there is help, but then how do you test or screen for dyslexia?
Well, a professional who will do it will do a more formal measure of that CAP, the K sound test. We have nationally normed published tests. One's called the Comprehensive Test of Phonological Processing. That task I just described, saying CAP, the K sound, is one of 10 subtests of that test. And they measure multiple skills of what you can do with spoken words, not with written, not reading, not spelling. It's all at the spoken level first. But other ways you screen for it is just noticing how well can they actually write the letters for the sounds. You say the sounds, they write the letters. Can they do it? You point to the letters, can they give you the sound, not the name? Because letter names don't help you with reading and spelling at all. Knowing that T is called a T is not going to make you a better reader speller. It's part of the criteria to finish kindergarten, and it's usually one of the criteria by which you say you're ready to go to first grade, but it actually doesn't impact or help your reading and spelling skills. So the sound of the letter is far more important than the actual letter name. So if you see, a simple way to screen your child is point to the letters and ask them just to say the sound for each letter. Or you say a letter, ask them to write the letter that goes with those sounds. And that gives you a very clear, kind of general soft indicator of what their letter sound skills are developing. In the professional realm, if you go to a psychologist or speech therapist, both of who are licensed to diagnose, and ask them to do a dyslexia screening, there's professionally made dyslexia screening tests that they can utilize. They will do some speech language skills. They'll also do what we call some rapid naming skills. It's a funny task where they'll take maybe a page that's got 50 colored blocks on it. And they're little tiny squares, and they're lined up in columns and rows, but it's actually, Felice, only 6 colors. But they're randomly scattered on 50 of these blocks, and all you ask the child to do is to go left to right across each row and name the color of the block. Because what we're looking for is how easy can they retrieve words that we know they already know. And you'll see some kids go red, green, red, blue, red, yellow, blue, and they're just really struggling to say the words. And we call those kids who have struggles with rapid retrieval, which means the researchers will call that a child who's going to end up probably having what we call a double deficit dyslexia. They have weaker phonological skills, and they have struggles retrieving the words. And here's how your parents will see that in reading. You sounded out a word on the first page. You get like 3 lines down, it's the same word, and the kid acts like he's never seen it before. And you're like, no, you just read this one. But they can't retrieve what they just said. That retrieval system is not working as well. And we know part of that retrieval system is that phonological system. So what the Now Foundations program does at the Morris Center or at nowprograms.com, it's actually going back and rebuilding that phonological processor at the neurology of it, which is very fascinating because we know today it's not just acoustic. We actually know by some really fascinating research. I didn't do it, just a brilliant scientist did it. He had a laser eye tracker looking at the baby's pupils when the baby's face to face with mom. And mom's saying, hi, Sally, la, la, la. And the laser eye tracker, the question they were trying to answer is, where does the baby look when you're speaking to them face to face? And Felice, they did this with 2-month, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12-month-old babies. And what they found was up to 6 months of age, babies are looking right here. They're looking at your eyes, and they're kind of giving it's almost like a facial recognition. But around 8 months of age, the majority of them start going right here, and they're watching your lips move, watching what your mouth does. And in typical language development, infants usually start to babble around 8 months of age. We think it's because they've watched your mouth move so much, it's made their motor cortex start to get active, and they're trying to get their mouth to do what they see your mouth doing. So they're mapping visual and acoustic together. And here's why. I'm going to give you 2 sounds. They're English sounds, but I'm only going to let you hear them. I'm not going to let you see them. The sounds are and. Now I'll do them again. The sounds are and. Felice, are they the same or different? What do you think?
They sound different.
Okay, now let's check, because I only gave you acoustics. Now, if I give you a visual, see if you're actually more confident when I go and.
They're different. Yeah.
And how do you know?
Because of the placement of your tongue, right?
Right. So the first thing you can see my top teeth bite my bottom lip to make that letter F sound like first. And in the second sound, my tongue stuck out, my teeth bit down on my tongue, and you're making the TH sound like thing. But acoustically, they're very similar. So the brain does better if it adds visual and acoustic together. It helps make some of those sounds easier to perceive. But the question the researchers were asking was, okay, but then how does the child know if they said free, like it doesn't cost anything, or 3, like it's the number? Because acoustically, sound a lot alike. And you can't use eyes this time. You can't look at your own mouth. So how do they know which one did they say? And that's where these two other parts of the neurology come into play. It's what we call tactile or touch of the teeth, tongue, and lips. And it's what we call kinesthetic, which is movement of the teeth, tongue, and lips. If you can feel your top teeth bite your bottom lip, you know you're going to say free, like it doesn't cost anything. When you feel your tongue stick out and your teeth bite down, now you know you're going to say 3, like the number. So the 4 pieces of the brain that build your phonological skills are not just acoustic. They're not just acoustic and visual. It's acoustic, it's visual, and it's mouth tactile and mouth movement. So we call it oral tactile and oral kinesthetic. So our program goes back and rebuilds those systems first with no letters at all.
Wonderful.
Because the letters are an abstract representation of the sound.
Makes sense.
You'll also see your parents see kids struggle with B's and D's. They'll look at a B and they'll say duh, and like, no, that's not the duh, that's the buh. And the kid's trying to remember, but a B and a D look a lot alike, and you flip it another way, it turns into a P. You flip it another way, it turns into a Q. It's so confusing. But when you take them to the mouth and you say, okay, watch my mouth when I go buh, and this is something all of your parents can do. Ask your child to watch your mouth. When I say buh, what's moving, my lips or my tongue? And they go buh, buh, your lips. Okay, try your lips. See if your lips move to say the sound buh. And we begin to learn that our lips come together, our lips pop apart for the letter B. But that's not what our mouth does for the letter D. In that one, we go duh, duh, and we see our tongue goes up and taps the top of my mouth and comes back down. Now you're giving the brain a better way to discriminate and learn, okay, that's the one that makes my lips pop, and it says buh. And this other letter is the one where my tongue has to go up and tap, and it says duh. In the treatment program, we get more complicated than that. We actually teach you names. We call them lip poppers and tongue tappers. We have a little picture of the lips popping apart, or a little movie, or we have a little picture, a little movie of the tongue going up and tapping and coming down. But just for the typical parent, it can be really empowering for your child to help them understand their mouth is moving in different ways for these different sounds.
And then, so how do you determine the intervention? Like when you screen a child in your system, then you come up with, well, we used to call it the IEPs, or the individual evaluation plans. So is there a new name for them now?
No, we still have IEPs, but here's the problem that we found out with the IEPs. In about 2012, a well-known reading researcher named Barbara Foreman reported on the success rate of IEPs in the United States. And the question is, and you know this, what percentage of kids do so well from the IEP that they leave special ed? They don't need the assistance anymore. They don't need the accommodations. They don't need easier books. They're now reading and spelling at their IQ level, which is where we would want kids to be. And sadly, Felice, the success rate of the special ed IEP system is 5% of kids leave special ed. 95% of kids will never finish getting enough improvement to actually exit those accommodations and compensations. So my group did a big research study. It was $1 million study. We took 2 groups of kids who both had severe reading problems. They're reading at the 5th percentile. That means 95% of their classmates read better than they did, but they all had regular IQs. They were not because of learning difficulty, wasn't because of an IQ issue, and it can't be. By that diagnostic manual that I talked about, it says the reading problem can't be due to IQ or some neurological injury. So we gave them our Now Foundations intervention, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, and we're able to move those kids from the 5th percentile to the 45th percentile. And they only got 8 weeks of intervention. This is the first study ever. We actually published it in 1999. It was the first study ever showing that you could actually dramatically close that gap in those reading skills with highly intensive, highly explicit, developmentally built intervention programs. And then the most remarkable finding was it wasn't 5% of those kids that left special ed. Felice, it was 40% of those kids within 1 year of getting that 8 weeks of intervention left special ed. Now
So
that
what you're
gave, yeah,
so
go
what you're
ahead.
telling me is now the public school said, this is so wonderful, and we're going to implement this.
Well, I thought that might help. So in 1999,
Yeah.
I opened the nation's first free charter school for dyslexia.
Oh, wow.
I'm one of the founders. I'm the voluntary president of the board. And we put our program, that Now Foundations, it's got a big long name. It's Now Foundations for Speech, Language, Reading, and Spelling. And we named it that because that's the developmental hierarchy. You build speech processing skills first, then you work on language skills, and then goes to reading, and then goes to spelling. There's no language in the world that you read and spell it first and speak it later. So all language starts at the spoken level, and that's where our treatment starts.
Mhm.
And so we were showing that if you actually did that intervention early, you could then actually close the gap in those skills, and then those kids actually would leave special ed. And so we set up the Einstein School in Gainesville, Florida. In 1999, all the kids in the school, 120, grades 2 through 8, all have dyslexia, might have an additional, attention difficulty, might have an additional dyscalculia, the math problems, might have an additional dysgraphia, the spelling and written composition struggles, and they may have other learning difficulties that are more sensory motor. But that school was built to show if the school uses what's called an evidence-based program. In healthcare, that means you took your program, you compared it to somebody else's program in a head-to-head study to figure out which one got the best results. That's what we do in healthcare. Physicians know penicillin, best treatment for strep throat, but it's actually not the best treatment for ear infections. And how do they do that? Well, somebody did a head-to-head study called a randomized controlled trial and figured out that penicillin is for strep throat and C-chlor or amoxicillin is for ear infections. So we did that same caliber of medical research. And that's how we then set up the Einstein School. And yeah, we naively thought this is going to sway all the schools to want to partner with this. We got a grant, $250,000 grant to produce, this is going to date myself, a VHS, and send that VHS tape to all the other charter schools in the nation, showing them, here's how we handle our literacy issues. And you could do it in your charter school because it's such a developmentally based program. It can dually be doing enrichment and remediation or prevention simultaneously if you give it to the whole class. But you're right, that is not what happened. Where the school still helps 120 kids a year, and the district is happy just to let us help those kids because their grade goes higher immediately as they move those kids off of their books. Mm-hmm. And it's not the goal we had hoped for. We had hoped for better adoption of the school.
And to me, that's so tragic.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons I began homeschooling, because when I met with the facilitator at the one school, and they told me, because my son, my oldest, who was speech delayed, okay, he took a test and they put his IQ at like 40 because, and so they wanted to put him in a sign language class. And I said, the child can hear. Yes. So I ended up going all the way up to the school board, and I had a meeting with the head of special education, and he told me that I could not make a unilateral decision of where my child would be placed. And I said, I actually know what the word unilateral means, and I'm going to take him out of school and I'm going to homeschool. Yeah. And we never looked back, and his IQ was normal. And, he just was delayed, and he, it's fine. And actually he's a great reader. He's a great speller, but his comprehension was weak. Right. So how can you read so well and not know what, like we would be watching a movie and he would say, what does that mean? Yeah. So we worked through that, and I think that was one of the benefits of homeschooling. And just like you were talking about for the parents, all these modalities that he's talking about, this is, getting a trampoline until your, home association or insurance company makes you take it away like we did, but just get it for a short period of time, or even a rebounder at home. There's a lot of things you can do, which is our next question is, what is the key in, OT, which I'm assuming is occupational therapy and language development. Right. Because my son did have it, my first. He
Right.
went, twice a week, and it actually was out of our local hospital.
Mhm.
And it was horrendously expensive. It
Yes.
was
Yeah.
ridiculously, because it was, first of all, based in a hospital.
Exactly.
But we actually, I think we had one of the best OT people there, and also the speech pathologist was wonderful. And that
Nice.
really helped a lot. And then I could continue the treatment at home.
Right.
You want to know the one book I threw away that I hated when I was in the learning disabilities program was speech. I hated that book. All the things you're talking about is giving me PTSD with the tongue placement and all this stuff. I was just like, no, I told my husband, I go, we'll eat, beans and rice, which I don't really, I'm teasing here. Okay. More like
Yes.
pasta and I'm Italian, we'll do some low budget, food just to be able to do this for our child, because it's so needed. And then I
Right.
ended up continuing that at home, and he was 4 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And here's
So,
one piece to touch on, since you brought this up, because it's so important, and it's really something very simple all of your listeners can do. From studying stroke research, where someone's had a stroke and part of the brain is damaged, we've learned that this part of the brain here is controlling the reading and spelling. And if you get damage up here, it will change your reading and spelling skills and make them worse. But it won't change your comprehension skills. You can still understand what people are saying to you just fine. And if you can read it, you can understand it. If you get damage back here a little bit further behind the ear, the opposite happens. You now have just fine reading and spelling skills, but Felice, you can't comprehend. You can't understand what people are saying to you. You can't understand what you're reading on books. So let me condense 6 decades of research and tell you what we've learned is every parent needs to actually cue, prompt, and model their child to do one thing. And this changes comprehension more than anything. You want them to understand that when you're listening to somebody speak to you, or you're reading a book, or you're listening to a book, you want to be making movies in your head. Picture the scene, picture the colors, picture you're zooming in or you're panning out, or, see the horse running across the field when you hear the story about Black Beauty. And you want to model that, describe that, explain the imagery, because when kids become better at making movies in their head, their comprehension drastically improves.
wonderful.
When kids get better at actually making a movie, to think about what they want to tell you, it facilitates their ability to organize their words, coordinate which words they're going to say, and speak to you in a more organized, cohesive fashion. So essentially, their movie becomes your movie because you heard what they said and you got a movie that matched the movie they had. And we call that good, clear communication. So the imagery piece is really important. So that means when families take trips, sure, the videos are fun to watch videos, but sometimes no video, audiobook. Get a really cool audiobook that has some information the kids love. It's got great voices, and let them listen to a story, and partway through pause it and then say, hey, the story's about a horse and they've not told us what the horse looks like. Here's what my movie is. I see the horse all white with a black tail and a black mane. What do you think the horse looks like? And ask each of your kids, and each of them is probably going to have a different image. And say, okay, let's listen and see who's got the right picture of the horse. And then the story goes on to say the horse was called Black Beauty because she had a black body and a black mane and a black tail. And then everybody pretty much has to change their movie because now the story gave them more details. Mm-hmm. So practicing imagery, modeling it, discussing it, making explicit references to it, and helping your child learn how to make movies will have a huge impact on not only their listening comprehension and not only their reading comprehension, but it's actually a precursor to really good writing. Now they understand that the words they write down on the page has to build a movie in the reader's brain. And if you say vague words like the thing was by the place next to the stuff, nobody knows what to visualize, but it's a grammatically correct sentence that you wrote. But if you write the small white poodle went down the brown dirt road next to the green grassy field at a beautiful orange sunset, now you've given them color and size and location, and that's helped build the movie in the reader's brain. Wonderful. So we want all of your listeners to understand that. Everybody can do that. They can model it. And that's one of the powers of audiobooks. And like what you said, your family talks. And that's one of the powers of speaking to each other is you're actually building that verbal communication skill, which should be building that mental imagery skill as well.
Yeah, the downside of we're all talkers is that the volume can be very loud. Yeah. One of my children especially is very loud. Oh my gosh. That's the communication major child. Yeah, to be heard, right? Yeah. So.
And when you got 5, 6, or 9 kids, they're all competing for a voice,
right?
A chance to say something.
So, any last words that you want to leave the listener with? That obviously we'll have all the links on the show notes, and let me just tell everyone that's vintagehomeschoolmoms.com, episode 527, Unlocking Learning Potential, and all the links. You had a TED Talk. Congratulations for that. It was very good. And you've got a YouTube channel, and you've got the programs and all the links here. But yes. What can you share with the parents that?
Well, probably two really important pieces of advice. One, the majority of your parents are homeschooling for a reason, because they know what the school was doing wasn't working.
Right.
And so what you're looking for is a different caliber of program than what schools typically buy. Schools buy anything a publisher sells, but your physician can't do that. Your physician can only choose medications if they've been scientifically tested and proven to be effective. So you're looking for programs that actually have research that backs them up, not about the program, but on the program itself. So if you're looking for a program that's actually going to be effective, look for one that has research to back it up. 2, understand that it's not completely accurate from a brain scientist perspective to say that a dyslexic child's brain works differently. There's only 8 systems the brain is using to process information and to learn. Every dyslexic has those 8 systems, as does the non-dyslexics. So it's not so much that the brain is working differently, it's working less efficiently. And your brain is always able to change the efficiency if it gets the right practice and the right hierarchy and with the right intensity and frequency of instruction. That means daily instruction for 20 minutes a day is always going to give you faster growth than twice a week for 60 minutes. So that daily instruction piece, the evidence-based program that's been tested and proven to be effective, and know that if somebody tells you your child has made the most progress they can make, they're really telling you that you've exceeded what they know.
Right.
So go find somebody who knows more, because that's what homeschool parents are typically doing. They're looking for somebody who knows more and can help them do more. And that's completely possible. That's out there, and we love to help with that. And we do free consultations with parents as well. And we have a wide range of price points. You can't afford not to work with us, because we're here to have a big life-changing impact for literacy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for making the cut and coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dr. Conway. Take care.
My pleasure, Lise. Thank you.
And vintagehomeschoolmoms.com. Make sure you check out this wonderful episode. Take care, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and thevintagehomeschoolmoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.